Hello, my name is Elaine Vong, and I'm here to show you ways to accelerate validation during the pandemic. My background in process engineering, facilities, utilities, equipment qualification, cleaning, sterilization, and process validation gives me the unique perspective to introduce tools for accelerating validation activities during the pandemic and ideally post-pandemic as well. Let's get started. Step on the gas. Let's accelerate validation during the pandemic. First, we're going to give you a little overview. I have Validation 101, then we're going to talk about paper-based validation, followed by paperless software-based validation, and software options and comparison. So Validation 101, why validate? A historical perspective I can offer is the 1937 elixir sulfonamide incident that precipitated the formation of our modern FDA. Sulfonamide was used to treat strep throat infections using a powder or a tablet. In 1937, the elixir was reformulated for ease of dosing to pediatric and elderly patients, but yet used by adults as well, but only flavor, appearance, and fragrance were evaluated. The formulation chemist used diethylene glycol, which is antifreeze and poisonous, to dissolve sulfonamide into solution. In 1937, it was not illegal to use toxic ingredients in formulations. The FDA laws did not prohibit dangerous, untested, or poisonous drugs. In a quote from Carol Ballantyne's publication in 1981, called the FDA Consumer Magazine, she said, "By the 1930s, it was widely recognized that the Food and Drug Act of 1906 was obsolete, but bitter disagreement arose as to what should replace it. By 1937, most of the arguments had been resolved, but congressional action was stalled. Then came the shocking development, the deaths of more than 100 people after using a drug that was clearly unsafe. That's this sulfonamide elixir. The incident hastened the final enactment in 1938 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the statute that today remains the basis for FDA regulation of these products. In the USA, the FDA ensures safety of our foods, drugs, and medical devices and cosmetics. There are many other regulatory bodies as well that ensures safety of these products worldwide. In the US, the pharmaceutical regulation requirements are 21 CFR Part 211 and 21 CFR 820. In the EU, we have Iduralex Volume 4 Annex 15 for pharmaceutical drugs, as well as the European Medicines Agency regulation for medical devices. It's entitled EMA Regulation 2017/745 of the European Parliament and the Council of the 5th of April 2017. I've included a link to these documents in my participant packet. And also ISO 13485. So over the last 20 to 25 years, we've seen a movement from just installation qualification, operational qualification, process qualification to risk-based approaches for leveraging factory acceptance testing, site acceptance testing, and design qualification, and then executing reduced IQ, OQ, PQ, or PPQ testing once on site. Some of these risk-based approaches involve GAMP5, which is for GXP software systems, ISP Baseline Guide 5, and the International Council for Harmonization Q8 Quality by Design. We're able to leverage these things in order to take a risk-based approach to validation activities. See the slide participant packet for more regulatory information, industry guidance documents, and more. So Validation 101, the general requirements. Equipment should meet user-specified requirements and be designed, constructed, located, and installed for its intended use, cleaning, and maintenance. Equipment should be regularly calibrated, inspected, and/or checked following a written procedure, including instrumentation for calibration and/or testing. All software must be validated before use, and all validation activities and findings should be documented. I will point out that under item 1, the manufacturers, under point 2, all testing instrumentation being calibrated pre and post validation activities in order to mitigate risk. Imagine if you found out 3 months after your completed PQ that your temperature calibration failed. By having a pre and post calibration right bracketing either side of your validation activities, you mitigate that risk and find out if you have a problem at that time rather than months down the road. So Validation 101 definitions. Factory acceptance testing is evaluation of equipment during and after the assembly process at the manufacturer to verify that it is built and operates in accordance with design specifications. Site acceptance testing is testing according to client-approved test plans and test specifications to show a system is installed and interfaces with other systems and peripherals in its working environment. And design qualification describes the user requirements and defines the functional and operational specifications of this equipment. Validation 101 definitions further has IQ is the document that the system has the required prerequisite conditions to function as expected. OQ, documenting that the equipment performance is consistent with the user requirement specification within the manufactured specified ranges. Sometimes people will ask, what if I never intend to operate at the manufacturer's limits of the equipment? This is a soft requirement. It's always a good idea to ensure that the equipment that you've purchased works as designed or that you get what you're paying for in terms of capability of the equipment. Later, if you don't do your operational qualifications at the limits of the manufactured specified ranges, and later someone wants to use it at those limits, they're going to have to requalify because you did not cover the full range. So that can just save some time down the road. And performance qualification documents that equipment performance is reproducible within the specific working range in simulated real-world conditions. So the general process for validating is someone's going to pre-approve an IQ-OQ protocol, execute that protocol, write their report for their IQ-OQ, and get their approvals. Then it goes on to PQ if there's one required. You need a pre-approved protocol, execute that protocol, write your report, and gain approvals for those as well. Finally, you're complete. Along the way, there's a handling of lots of paper unless your company is one of the ones that we'll talk about later. So the Validation 101, an IQ summary. Uniquely identify the equipment by serial and/or I'll call it asset ID. Many companies track these assets, I think valued over $2,000 for depreciation reasons. And there are unique identifiers that are used at most companies to help track that asset, but it's also used for identifying the equipment for validation. Plan and document the placement of the new equipment in relation to your existing equipment, including your utility hookups. And you want to consider the impact of your equipment on your room conditions. For something like an autoclave that generates a lot of heat load, particularly when someone opens the door at the end of a cycle and a lot of steam is released, that can have a load on your HVAC that needs to be considered when you're designing your facility. Develop a plan for cleaning and maintaining your equipment, specifying the version of software and configuring it for the application, including backups, updating all plant drawings and documentation to include your new equipment, and conducting a pre-startup safety review. This last item is not necessarily an FDA regulation, but it's part of the other regulated part of our industry, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. And it's part of most companies' employee health and safety requirements, such as if I was installing a new fermenter, are there heat or burn risks? Is there powder generation? Is there a noise rating that would require someone to be part of a hearing conservation program? These are all usually rolled into IQ-OQ activities at most companies. For the OQ summary, we have testing the components of your new equipment in the entire system to ensure they function as intended. Testing the equipment at the manufacturer's limits. Again, as I pointed out, that's a soft requirement, but you might want to consider doing that to make sure the equipment operates as the manufacturer designed and that you catch it when you're installing it, not 5 years later when you want to all of a sudden qualify it at a wider range. Testing alarms and their resulting actions. And conducting any functional testing such as temperature mapping, pressurization. This may be executed by either validation personnel or operators in the plant. It depends on conventions and procedures at your business, but either validation personnel or operators is acceptable here. For PQ summary, test that the equipment can operate consistently at normal operating conditions per the user requirements and functional specifications. This may include using the number of personnel and operators that will be in the facility at the time, materials and commodities that are used in manufacturing normally, the environmental conditions of temperature, humidity, etc. that are required, as well as using your approved standard operating procedures. So I'm going to give an example of a validation, a genetic analyzer, since we're in the middle of the pandemic. Some of you may be familiar with some of these genetic analyzers from Thermo Fisher Applied Biosystems. This is the 3500DX series genetic analyzer. It's a fluorescence-based DNA analysis instrument using capillary electrophoresis technology. And it consists of the instrument, a computer workstation and monitor, and integrated software. In this validation example, this genetic analyzer might have an IQ consisting of ensuring that the room can meet the operating requirements and monitoring of this room. The user's manual from the manufacturer states that a 15 to 30 degrees C range for temperature and less than a 2 degree C variation during operation of the instrument. 20 to 80% humidity non-condensing. Calibrating a voltmeter and checking the receptacle to verify it meets the electrical requirements of 100 to 240 volts, 50 to 60 hertz, and 50 amps. Verifying and identifying the warranty and service contract, or alternatively, if you have a calibration group or maintenance group that maintains instruments like this, there could be a check saying that that has been put in place. Verify that the product received matches the product that you ordered. Recording the make, model, serial number, asset ID, and the software version. Verifying components have been unpacked and positioned according to the manufacturer's recommendations. And verifying that the instrument and computer setup was according to the installation service manual. Training all instrument users and verifying that they do have training already. So for the OQ for the genetic analyzer, we would verify that the instrument successfully powers on and that the LED indicators all function. Record the operating system version, service pack, and software version number. Verifying all operating system and software versions are compatible. Verify that their laser power meter and probe calibrations are valid. Identifying array tools used to check the instrument. Verify subsystem including laser, capillary assembly, polymer, and buffers. And performing spectral calibration and verifying that calibration meets the specifications. The PQ might consist of identifying calibration in standard materials, performing sequencing and fragment analysis, install performance checks, and verify that the check results meet the acceptance criteria. So pre-pandemic, paper-based workflow. Many companies were not performing digital paperless validation prior to the pandemic. And we can see that we would need to pre-approve an IQ-OQ protocol that's going to be word processed on a computer, then get that approved and execute that IQ-OQ protocol, which is going to involve someone manually filling out a paper packet and then scanning that copy into the computer, writing the report, word processing that, and assembling a validation package in a binder of some sort, and then routing those for approvals, either using physical signature and then scanning the material, or a digital signature via their EDMS system if they have one. So when we scan items like this, we also need to verify that scanning process to make sure there wasn't a misfeed or misaligned page and that all materials were scanned in and captured. There's some downsides here. There's a lot of time-consuming drafting time, routing protocol for report approvals, as well as assembling those binders, which involves a lot of page stamping in my experience, and filling out page numbers, et cetera, once the entire package is collated. Also during audit, having a timely retrieval of those packages can be burdensome. It's difficult to maintain validation integrity after completion. In my experience, we've had pages lost out of validation packages in our validation library, plus the managing of printing, distribution, and storage of these things. The stage is set now. Here we are in the pandemic. We have no workers commuting or traveling. Everyone is suddenly working remotely. We had to rapidly implement software solutions for remote working, such as Zoom, as well as server traffic, et cetera. People had to get different connectivity solutions at their homes. There's a pressure to make progress on our timelines. with these new restrictions in place, or should I say in spite of these new restrictions, which lends us to virtual execution of that paper workflow to continue validation as best as we can during the pandemic as the bare minimum to keep up with work that continues to flow through. So here we have a virtual execution of a paper workflow. We still need to scan and upload our paper validation files, organize and edit those files on company servers. This is familiar with the existing software, but we're still processing lots of paper. We still need personnel on site to conduct our IQ, OQ, and PQ activities. We're manually managing these tasks, the schedule, compiling traceability matrices, and our validation master plan. We must ensure accountability for the approved protocol and the one executed copy. That one execution copy can be difficult because multiple people may print out the execution copy. Also, not all employees had printers at their homes to be able to do this, and someone would have to be at the office to be able to execute. We also need to verify that scanning process to ensure our data integrity. The virtual execution of this paper workflow looks something like this. Here's our pre-approved IQ-OQ protocol, and we're word processing and saving that file. Now we're going to go execute. Someone's going to manually fill that out in the plant and then scan that in. And then we have the IQ-OQ report. Someone's going to word process and assemble this validation package. And then we have our approvals, again, physically signing and scanning or using digital signature via EDMS. Assembling that validation package while under pandemic restrictions for the workplace capacity is problematic. Someone still has to go into the office to do this. So, accelerating validation with software, though, we can go from this virtual execution of a paper workflow to stepping on the gas and having a paperless software-based validation solution. This gives us real-time view of project schedule, easier to monitor, control, and improve our validation processes. It builds a digital validation library to reduce your future cycle time. It gives easy access to work from previous project phases and access to all validations anytime and anywhere. It automatically will manage your validation lifecycle if you pick the right software. Paperless software-based validation solutions. Computer access to software with cloud storage will give us the ability to edit those files within that software. We can create all our protocols reports within our software. We can execute our IQ, OQ, and PQ remotely, leveraging on-site personnel. We can manage our tasks, route for approvals, notify personnel of open items, and link all these documents together. This can automatically generate the traceability matrix for your qualification documentation. The software solution makes the validation process and activities transparent and eliminates the needs to manually create and maintain that traceability matrix. By establishing links between both documents as well as requirements, test cases, and results, items can be tracked and subsequent actions assigned to individuals, which facilitates compliance. Paperless software-based validation workflow looks like this. You can write in the software your IQ-OQ protocol and get it pre-approved through the automatic routing. When it comes time to execute, you enter the results into the software via the cloud. And then you have the software assist you in writing your reports. Then it routes for approvals, which are routed in the software itself. And I should note that any deviations or discrepancies or incidents that occur during validation have their own separate routing and nesting into your final report. So let's take a look at a case study. Pharmaceutical company A. Pre-pandemic, they had a pilot for paperless validation at a single site. During the pandemic, they tried to continue this paper-based workflow at all the other sites except for that pilot. They were unable to maintain that workload, so they pivoted to a rapid, efficient rollout of paperless validation workflow at all their sites. Their training was SOP-based, just read and understand, with optional training videos. And the response has been very enthusiastic. Everyone has embraced this paperless validation workflow. I personally spoke with their director of IT quality, and she had said prior to the pandemic, it was very difficult to get any sites to volunteer to trial or pilot this new cloud software digital validation solution. Once the pandemic occurred and everyone was at home, there was clamoring for rapid rollout, and everyone wanted to get on board rapidly to help deal with their work flow and their workload and still keep progress moving forward. So how fast can you go? Fast can you go? At the same company, execution of their validation remained the same for both the paper and digital execution. What has changed, though, is the software prevents the user from advancing to the next step without completing an item or task and putting their signature. So basically, we have reduced all the execution errors to 0. This eliminated 95% of their good documentation practice errors that normally occur during paper execution, which translated into a 15 to 20% time savings by eliminating execution errors and not having the need to collate paper validation packages at the conclusion. Paperless validation embeds the time, date, and signature of the person executing for each validation activity. Again, I spoke with the director of IT quality here at this company, and she had said everyone is very enthusiastic and is in the groove of the new workflow and can't believe that they used to do it the old-fashioned paper way. The next case study I have is AbbVie Cork, Ireland. They had an initial rollout for commissioning and qualification capabilities only at a single site, just Cork, Ireland. Now they're deploying globally across all sites. They have 4 sites online with over 15 scheduled in the next year. They utilize the ISPE Baseline Guide 5, Volume 5 approach and quality by design deliverables. And if you're familiar with that, there is a set of deliverables that comes with quality by design. At the very end, as you're doing your risk assessment, the output is a control strategy. And the control strategy needs to be delivered by the equipment. And so they needed to tie those deliverables back to what they're qualifying in each of their pieces of equipment. They implemented a paperless validation software for this risk-based approach. And here is their statistics on their time savings. So for their user requirement specification approval cycle, pre-deployment, it would take them 2 months to get something approved. After deployment, it was only 7 days, which is an 88% time savings. Their site acceptance test execution went from 30 hours to 14 hours, which is a 53% time savings. And they're creating their site acceptance testing documentation went from 30 hours to 20 hours, so it's a 33% time savings. This information for this case study was provided by Sol Jarvis from AbbVie. So furthermore on their study, they prioritize these important functions: automated data integrity, critical element and test tracing, automated requirements traceability matrix. That means if something changes in the equipment specification, it automatically would update that traceability matrix without someone manually having to do it. It would just rev up the version. They valued user friendliness and ease of use, and validation reporting features such as KPIs for the validation status. Their automated requirements traceability matrix has the quality by design, critical quality attributes, and critical process parameters, process risk assessment, and control strategy elements, which tie to qualification documents for testing. Since the quality by design elements are lifecycle documents, as they change, this may drive the need for changes in the qualification documents. Their KPIs for validation status included items such as protocols in draft, protocols routing, execution in progress, etc. And they also had reports on issues and deviations as one of their key functions that they wanted the software to have. Additional benefits to paperless validation include streamlining your metrics and having data mining, expediting your protocol generation and execution, improved response time during audits for retrieval of packages, real-time review and monitoring of tasks for validation, reducing your documentation errors, reducing the use of office supplies such as paper and printer toner cartridge and binders, eliminating the documentation, transportation, and storage in your validation library as well as your validation librarian, and it maintains the order and relationship of documents. The director of IT quality at the pharmaceutical company I spoke with, she said that by instituting a paperless validation solution, it allows them to focus on the actual work of validation, eliminating the manual labor related to the workflow and document management. Validation personnel can fully focus on the actual job of doing the validation, planning it, specifications, testing, and reporting. This facilitates compliance and reduces the cost and cycle time for validation overall. So software options, I'm going to present 3 that I reviewed and looked for. 5 Validation has a product called Go5, Neat Solutions, and ValGenesis. We'll take a look at each one at a time. So 5 Validation has a product called Go5. They were founded in 2019 and launched their validation software the same year. Go5 Validation is a validation company that has developed their own software for managing validation paperwork. They in turn use their validation software at their clients that contract with them for validation work, and they use it for free just to show them and test it out if the client is willing, so they can see what paperless validation might look like and whether it's something that they would like to use further. They're a privately held company, and they have offices in Sao Paulo, Brazil, as well as Boston, Massachusetts. They have 45 clients with 588 users, and they have as many as 5 site deployments for one client. That's the largest to date. Neat Solutions was founded in 2007 and launched their validation software in 2014. They've had $14.48 million private investment in 2020 and a $16.63 million investment in 2021. They have offices in Limerick, Ireland, Norristown, Pennsylvania, and Halifax, Nova Scotia. And 14 of the top 20 global pharma companies are their clients right now. They have 4,500 plus users across 75 plus client sites. ValGenesis, founded in 2005 and launched their validation software in 2009. They have $24 million of private equity financing received this year in 2021. They have offices in South San Francisco, Tampa, Florida, Toronto, Ontario, Schiphol, Netherlands, Munich, Germany, and Chennai, India. They have 88 clients with over 25,000 total users worldwide. Their clients range from 5 to 5,000 users across 1 to 50 sites. Software comparison chart. All 3 softwares are ISO 9001 certified or ISO 27001 certified or in progress. Both of those ISO standards relate to information security management and software security. All of them are 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, and they all have automatic backups. I would say it's worthwhile to inquire about the frequency and length of storage of different backups, daily backups, hourly backups, etc. 2 of them automatically update your validation master plan, and 2 of them have data management and reporting. Another software comparison chart shows template lifecycle control, standardization, and paperless text execution. Automated deviation reports are features that all of them possess. The ability to execute offline is only offered by one software, and I would say to just look into the system software functionality there carefully, whether you want or don't want that ability, to understand what the time date stamp is for your offline execution, whether it's your local time or a central server. One last software comparison chart. The ability to add attachments to documents, export to PDF, manage your workflow and have automation and project lifecycle, automated traceability matrix are features that all 3 software packages deliver. For deployment, from PO being placed until validation in a number of weeks, ValGenesis is 6 to 20 weeks, Neat Solutions is 4 to 16. For Go5, it's variable. It's going to depend on user needs and requirements. So you should ensure that the types of documents that you want to use as attachments are supported by each of the softwares that you might consider using, whether it's JPEG, PNG file, etc., PDF, to be able to attach that to your validation documents. Comparing options. For the virtual execution of the paper workflow, which we're forced to do during the pandemic, we do have a familiar workflow, and it's easy to set up with existing software. The downsides, though, are that we have to scan paper documents and validate or verify that scanning process, manually sort virtual files, creating a traceability matrix by hand, and then the risk of losing executed copies. And if you don't have an EDMS system, you are still compiling binders of information and having to store them in a validation library. If we move to the paperless software-based validation, the improvements are built-in data integrity with action log, an automatic traceability matrix generation, real-time progress monitoring of our schedule and our validation activities, automated workflow, and automated issuing of deviation reports, issues reports from your execution. The only downsides I could say are it still is a new software and new workflows that require configuration, training, and validation of that software. And it also requires someone to be on site for the physical inspections and tasks for your validation. You can leverage someone holding a webcam or an iPad or something like that to be able to hold it up and have someone remotely checking off the items that are completed in the execution copy of your protocols, but it does require still to have someone on site. So are you ready to accelerate? Paperless validation is still a computerized system validation. You need to validate the software, so you're going to need user requirements, including security and functional specifications before pursuing software options. Some of the functionality for security you should consider is unauthorized access, either internally or externally, data record destruction, either accidental or intentional, data and record modification, either inappropriate altering of your data, and unauthorized usages both internally and externally. You can use these user requirements and functional specifications to create your own comparison table of any software vendors that you consider for paperless validation. Factor in the project cost of your software licensing, support, training, and maintenance. Consider a single site beta test rollout for rolling out to other locations. That's all I have. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And it was a pleasure presenting to you ways of accelerating validation during the pandemic.